On August the 14th, a Russian freighter packed with 5,000 tons of Iranian drone parts lay hidden 800 kilometers from Ukraine, in waters Moscow believed untouchable. 13 minutes later, 14 Ukrainian kamikaze drones had turned the Caspian Sea's prized arms ship into burning wreckage, crippling Russia's logistics in a single precision strike. This attack didn't just rewrite the reach of modern warfare, it exposed how safe havens can become kill zones overnight. How did a nation without a navy breach Russia's most guarded rear? The answer reveals a lethal cargo, a shattered sanctuary, and the new rules of war. The Port Olia 4 was no ordinary freighter. At 400 feet and 4,900 gross tons, it was built for the heavy, winding river routes between Iran and Russia, a steel corridor designed to move weight, not just distance. Its hull, painted in the faded colors of commercial trade, concealed a cargo that would shift the balance of an entire war. The manifest, stamped with both Russian and Iranian seals, listed 5,000 tons of military goods. Each crate and barrel locked below deck was a building block for destruction. Guidance chips by the thousand, gyroscope sensors, navigation modules, and sealed drums of propellant. Pallets of electrical systems, warhead casings, and avionics modules lined the holds. Stacked in the shadows, 122mm rocket ammunition waited for its next journey. This was not a shipment for any ordinary battlefield. Intelligence analysts counted enough Shahed drone components aboard to assemble 25,000 attack drones, each one a future night of sirens over Ukrainian cities, a schedule of air raids penciled in by Russian planners. The scale was staggering. In a single hull, months of strike capacity moved silently up the Volga, bypassing the Black Sea's risks for the presumed sanctuary of the Caspian. The Iranian supply chain, routed through a maze of commercial fronts, delivered its cargo to Olia's docks, under the cover of routine trade. Once inside Russian territory, the parts would be divided, shipped by rail or truck to assembly plants, and then dispersed to launch pads across occupied Ukraine. The ship's captain, Sergei Kulagin, was no stranger to these routes. He had piloted the Olia 4 through Iranian and Russian waters for years, relying on the geography of the Caspian and the Volga-Don Canal as a shield. The Caspian, ringed by neutral or allied states, seemed a world away from the front lines. Anchored in the narrow channel near Olia, Kulagin kept his crew to routine, maintenance checks, radio logs, and the careful management of a cargo whose true value was known only to a handful of men in Moscow and Tehran. The hold's silence belied the stakes. Every hour at anchor, every radio silence, was a calculated risk. The ship's presence in Olia was a statement. Russia's war machine could draw breath, resupply, and strike again, untouched by the chaos to the west. But the numbers told a different story. 5,000 tons of Iranian-origin hardware, enough to replenish Russia's drone arsenal for months, now sat exposed on a single hull. The Port Olia 4 was more than a ship. It was a floating arsenal, a bet on the enduring safety of distance. In the language of logistics, it was the linchpin. One vessel, one route, one moment of vulnerability. The sanctuary of the Caspian had become its own trap. The captain, unwitting guardian of a cargo worth more than any commercial shipment, stood watch over a floating target whose loss would echo across the entire Russian war effort. Japanese synthetic aperture radar satellites swept the Caspian every 90 minutes, their beams slicing through cloud and darkness. Each pass generated a fresh image. Grainy, high-contrast outlines of hulls and cranes, time-stamped and tagged by analysts in Kyiv. The Port Olia 4 stood out not for what it broadcast, but for what it didn't. Its AIS transponder, normally a legal requirement for commercial traffic, had gone dark after midnight. No routine cargo ship disables its digital identity on approach to a Russian port. That silence drew attention. Inside Ukraine's military intelligence cell, a cluster of screens flickered with satellite mosaics and metadata overlays. Analysts compared drift patterns, anchor chain lengths, and mooring angles, matching SAR snapshots against port schedules and weather logs. The Olia 4's anchor routine, 4 to 6 hours at a time, always in the same shallow channel, left a predictable window. On each revisit, analysts measured hull shadow displacement, confirming the vessel had not shifted. The ship was waiting, exposed and static. Signal intelligence filled in what imagery could not. Port radio traffic dropped to a whisper when the Olia 4 arrived. No outgoing calls, no routine maintenance chatter, only a handful of encrypted bursts likely relayed to Moscow. This silence also betrayed it. A ship with nothing to say is a ship with something to hide. Analysts flagged the blackout, cross-referenced with satellite passes, and reconstructed a pattern. The vessel's attempts at stealth only sharpened its outline in the digital fog. Every layer of detection added confidence. SAR imagery confirmed the Olia 4's presence at 4:00, 5:30 and 7:00 local time. Metadata analytics mapped the absence of transponder pings against port entry logs, revealing a gap that corresponded exactly with the window when Russian traffic thinned and tugboats idled. The strike window, 4 to 6 hours of stillness, was now locked in. The decision chain in Kyiv moved fast. With each confirmed satellite pass, the intelligence cell updated strike planners on the ground. Weather models and river current forecasts narrowed the margin further. The Olia 4 was pinned, unable to slip away without detection. The mission profile would be built around this anchor window, where movement was impossible and the target could not hide behind routine. By the end of the third day of surveillance, the ship's fate was sealed, not by what it carried, but by the digital fingerprints it left behind. Synthetic aperture radar, metadata analytics, and a team of analysts who could turn silence into coordinates. These were the tools that unraveled secrecy and set the stage for the most ambitious drone strike of the war. At 5:45 a.m., 14 UJ-26 drones left their launch rails in synchronized sequence, each one a composite-bodied silhouette skimming the morning haze. The mission profile demanded precision. 12 attack drones, 2 relays, all programmed to maintain strict radio silence for most of the journey. Their operators, watching encrypted telemetry feeds from a remote command post, monitored every fluctuation in signal strength, every shift in wind. The drones hugged the terrain, flying between 20 and 60 meters above ground and water, using the clutter of riverbanks and lowland fog to disappear into background noise. Russian radar arrays, tuned to filter out slow-moving objects at low altitude, logged only faint, ambiguous echoes, classified as birds or weather. Each UJ-26 was engineered for this kind of ghost flight. The airframe's carbon composite skin cut radar cross-section to less than 0.01 square meters. Propeller noise was dampened, exhaust shrouded, and antennae tucked inside the fuselage to avoid glinting on electronic surveillance. GNSS and inertial navigation systems worked in tandem, correcting drift every few kilometers. Should the enemy jam satellite signals, the drones would switch seamlessly to inertial guidance, riding the programmed course with no outside input. The relay drones climbed higher, just enough to maintain line of sight with the attack group and the distant control station. Their job? Act as airborne repeaters, bouncing encrypted commands and real-time status reports across the 800-kilometer expanse. Frequency hopping protocols, borrowed and adapted from commercial drone racing circuits, shielded the data link from interception. If one relay was lost, the other would instantly assume full control, ensuring no break in command. Operators worked in pairs, one tracking telemetry, the other ready to take manual control if terrain or electronic interference threatened the mission. For 5 hours, the formation advanced in near-perfect silence, drifting over abandoned fields, skirting the edge of Russian air defense zones, and vanishing beneath the radar horizon. Every minute, the window for detection narrowed. Every kilometer, the risk of mechanical failure or signal loss grew. By 10:20 a.m., the lead drones approached the Volga-Don Canal, still undetected. The relay controllers confirmed signal integrity, then handed over to the attack group's onboard processors for final approach. The drones began to climb, just enough to clear the last low embankments and acquire their target visually. The encrypted control link pulsed steady. Operators checked warhead arming status, guidance drift, and battery reserves. No alarms, no deviation. The strike package was in position, invisible until the moment of impact. At 10:28 a.m., the first drone struck the Port Olia 4. The warhead detonated against the aft deck, shearing open ventilation shafts and spraying shrapnel through cable trays. Fire leapt instantly, smoke billowing from the superstructure as emergency alarms screamed to life. Within seconds, a second drone punched through the starboard waterline, its delayed fuse charge tearing a jagged breach below the waterline. River water surged into the lower holds, flooding compartments stacked with Shahed drone components and crates of ammunition. The crew scrambled. On the bridge, Captain Kalagin shouted orders over the roar of klaxons. Pumps engaged, then failed as a third impact ripped through the midsection, rupturing power conduits and sending sparks across oil-slicked corridors. The sequence was relentless. 4 axes of attack, each drone targeting a specific vulnerability. Stern, bow, midships, waterline. Some warheads shattered deck plates, others burrowed before detonating, fracturing bulkheads and venting fire into the engine room. Within 5 minutes, the vessel's electrical grid collapsed. Bridge instruments flickered out, firefighting systems sputtered, then died. The list to port grew sharper as water poured through the hull. Crewmen fought to seal compartments, but every hatch closed was met by another breach. At 10:33, a blast in the forward hold sent ammunition cooking off in sharp, staccato bursts. The air filled with choking smoke and the metallic tang of burning electronics. By 10:36, the Olia 4 was mortally wounded. Flooding advanced unchecked. Bulkheads groaned and deck plates buckled under the shifting weight. Black smoke curled above the superstructure, visible for kilometers. The bridge, now powerless, was abandoned as the captain gave the order to evacuate. Crew members donned life jackets and leapt for the dock or rescue tugs, chased by the echo of secondary explosions in the holds below. 12 of the 14 attack drones had found their mark. The precision was surgical, the tempo unrelenting. Each impact compounded the last, overwhelming every damage control procedure drilled by the crew. By 10:38, the last men abandoned ship. Within minutes, the Olia 4 was listing hard, her decks awash and her cargo lost to the river. The strike had lasted less than 13 minutes. The Caspian's supposed sanctuary had become a killing ground, and the arsenal meant to fuel months of Russian attacks now slipped beneath the surface. Within hours of the Olia 4's sinking, the Caspian's shipping lanes felt the aftershock. War risk insurance premiums for vessels calling at Olia and Astrakhan surged by an estimated 30 to 50%, an increase not seen since the first Black Sea drone strikes 3 years earlier. Underwriters in London and Dubai froze new coverage, forcing shippers to renegotiate or suspend contracts mid-voyage. For Russian carriers, government reinsurance offered a stopgap, but foreign operators halted planned arrivals, unwilling to risk uninsured transit through a newly hostile zone. Port authorities in Olia scrambled to process the backlog. At least 6 vessels sat delayed at anchor, their cargoes idling as risk assessors demanded fresh security guarantees. Satellite tracking aggregators logged a near halt in non-essential movements. 10 scheduled arrivals postponed or rerouted. Dozens of shipments redirected to Aktau and Turkmenbashi in Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan. Shipping bulletins from those ports recorded an immediate uptick in vessel notifications as logistics managers sought safer alternatives beyond Russian control. Commodity traders watched the disruption ripple outward. Bulk metals futures for Caspian shipments widened by up to 2.8% in a single day, a reaction to anticipated processing, gridlock and insurance bottlenecks. Grain and oil contracts held steady. Russia's overland routes blunted the shock. But the psychological impact was clear. In boardrooms and shipping offices, the Caspian was no longer a sanctuary. The cost of presumed safety had become quantifiable, and every new contract now carried the memory of a burning hull and a vanished cargo. Russian defense planners issued immediate orders for a full review of Caspian security protocols. Within hours, Moscow's Ministry of Defense began drafting requirements for new deep rear air defense layers, including mobile radar units, electronic warfare vehicles, and rapid response counter-UAV teams. The Volga corridor, once considered immune to attack, was reclassified as a high-risk zone. Procurement officers scrambled to source Israeli, Chinese, and domestic anti-drone systems, an admission that existing doctrine could not keep pace with the new threat. The shockwaves reached far beyond Russia. Military analysts in Ankara, Tehran, and New Delhi dissected the strike, noting the cost differential. 14 UJ-26 drones, each priced under $120,000, had neutralized a logistics asset worth tens of millions and months of war production. Defense journals began to speak of the democratization of precision strike, a world where mid-sized nations, or even well-funded non-state actors, could project power deep into hostile territory without fleets of bombers or cruise missiles. Global arms markets responded in kind. By September, contracts for counter-UAV radars and jammers surged, with American, Turkish, and South Korean firms reporting record inquiries from countries along the Caspian and Black Sea. Insurance underwriters, now treating rear-area drone strikes as baseline risk, adjusted premiums across Eurasia. NATO planners quietly updated their own rear-area defense manuals, citing the Olia strike as a case study. For Ukraine, the lesson was clear. Cost-effective, rapidly iterated drone technology could rewrite the rules of power projection. For Russia and its neighbors, the era of sanctuary by distance had ended. Every logistics hub, fuel depot, and port now required defenses once reserved for the front line. The Port Olia 4 attack did not just sink a ship, it forced a doctrinal rethink from Moscow to Mumbai and signaled that the future of warfare belongs to those who can adapt fastest, not just spend the most. When 14 Ukrainian drones traveled 800 kilometers to strike the Port Olia 4, they destroyed 5,000 tons of Iranian military components, enough to assemble 25,000 Shahed attack drones. Satellite images, intercepted communications, and verified cargo manifests confirm the precision and impact of this attack. Yet not all details are public. The full specifications of the UJ-26 drones and the exact sequence of Russian defensive responses remain classified by both governments. What is clear is the strategic shift that followed. Insurance rates for Caspian shipping surged, Russian defense ministries ordered a review of rear area security, and global militaries reassessed the vulnerability of supposedly safe supply lines. The Port Olia 4 strike stands as documented evidence that distance and secrecy no longer guarantee protection in modern warfare. The Caspian Sea, once a safe haven, is now part of the front line.